You're not a huge fan of Spellbound, are you? Tell us why. I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street. And welcome to the second of my conversations with Brad Friedman, my good friend from San Francisco, or on the peninsula, all about the work of Alfred Hitchcock, specifically in the latter half of the 1940s, focusing here on Spellbound, Notorious, and Rope. He's a bit less keen on Spellbound than some of us, so you'll see me having to do a bit of an uphill battle with him to convince him of its noir merits. Let's see if I succeed. I'll start off by telling him all about the greatness of the cast. A film that stars Ingrid Bergman and a very young Gregory Peck right at the beginning of his career is one of the many films that Hitchcock made with Leo G. Carroll, and in this case is based on a novel by Francis Beading. Now, Francis Beading, we both think, wrote at least one absolute classic, right, which is Death Walks in Eastreps, which is a fantastic movie, a fantastic book, and everybody should read that if they like.
It should be a movie, but it's one of the best serial killer mysteries of classic detective fiction.
Yeah, it's really fantastic.
Did I say movie too?
You were correcting me, so that's okay. But that's okay, I'll probably cut it all out anyway. So let's quickly talk about the book. So it was one of 31 Francis Beading books, and Beading was a byline used by two writers, John Palmer and Hilary Aidan St. George Saunders, who both worked at the precursor to the United Nations, at the League of Nations, throughout the entirety of the 20s and 30s. They somehow found time to write 36 novels together, and they also wrote books with other people, they wrote books on their own, and yet both died quite young. One died when he was 51, the other one when he was 58. But nonetheless, produced a lot of work. And this is one of their earliest books. It was originally published as The House of Dr. Edwards. It came out in 1927 in the UK. It is the basic structure of the film at a very simple level. The main three characters are the main three characters of the film, which is that you get Constance, who's the psychiatrist played by Ingrid Bergman, the head of the clinic where they all work, and then you get this new member of staff who's going to be taking over from the old head of the clinic, played by Gregory Peck. They actually switched the names in the book. Dr. Murchison is the Peck character's name, but they give it instead to Dr. Edwards, who is the one played by Leo G. Carroll. There's a murder, and she discovers that the new person is not who he says he is, and there's more to him, but falls in love with him, and then ultimately things are resolved. On the other hand, the book is quite different in many other respects, amongst which is that it's all set, despite being an English mental asylum, I suppose to use that phrase, it's all in France for some reason, in this kind of ex-castle. All the staff's all British, and all the patients are British. So I quite like this. They've all been banished to France for some reason. Yeah, I don't know. And it turns out that the baddie is in fact a Satanist and is planning to start a new cult. But it also has a really nice twist, which is one of those twists that's revealed about 80% of the way through. It's more of a thriller than a mystery. I'm giving nothing away, I promise. You've not read the book. I have. It's worth a read, and it's actually one of the few of their books, apart from Death Walks in Eastreps, that's comparatively easy to find. But also, because they both died young, all their work is in the public domain. So you can also read this novel online. I'll put a link to it on the show notes for the podcast, just if anyone is interested. I think it's worth a read. It's full of unexpected things, but the basic structure is not that different, except you never leave the clinic. Now, the movie, which, because this was written in 1927, and there are references to Freud and so on, so they know what they're talking about in that respect. They're being reasonably up to date. By the time the film comes out, one of the big things about it is that they're going to make it about psychoanalysis, and they're going to show dreams on screen. And who are they going to get to design those dreams? It's going to be Salvador Dali, who does a lot of paintings and is there for the shooting, and then a lot of it doesn't appear in the film.
18 out of 20 minutes is evidently cut from the finished dream sequence.
Well,
according to Ingrid Bergman, that may not be true, but that's what she said.
It turns out she's a bit wrong about that, apparently. I was just reading the Patrick McGilligan biography of Hitchcock, and he was saying, well, she misspoke a bit. It was far more elaborate, that's true. So everything is cut down and 2 bits of it are entirely removed. But apparently it wouldn't even have run to 5 minutes. That seems to be the truth of the matter. But nonetheless, it was simplified and then was, to a certain extent, reshot by William Cameron Menzies, who was the celebrated production designer on Gone with the Wind, and who in fact invented the term production design, and who then went on to be a director whose films are unusual, eccentric, visually very, very stylish, but tended to be made for very low budgets. The best of them, or the best known, is Invaders from Mars, the original version, which is now available on a absolutely superb Blu-ray from Ignite Films, which has been completely restored to its original colour splendour, and is well worth getting just for the extras. But in fact, looks fantastic. It's well worth getting. You've got to have a Blu-ray player to play it, although I'm sure there are streaming options. But you're not a huge fan of Spellbound, are you? Tell us why.
Well, first of all, I don't think there are many examples of filmic psychoanalysis that are interesting. My mom used to ask me, what happens when you're in therapy? And I said, it wouldn't interest anybody but me. And so I don't find that particularly interesting. And they get right into it. You said Dr. Murchison, Leo G. Carroll is the third main character. But Michael Chekhov has just as much springtime as Constance's mentor. And there's a long period where they are psychoanalyzing John, Dr. Edwards, in the film. It all leads to truths being uncovered that don't really interest me. And I think mainly, I don't think Gregory Peck is the epitome of a Hitchcock man. Hitchcock said, oh, I like you. Let's work together again. And look what that turned out. The Paradigm Case. I love Atticus Finch. I acknowledge his greatness in many films, but Peck to me here is really boring. I know that she was there originally more, and then they cut her down, but I wish Rhonda Fleming was in it more. She's fantastic. And Norman Lloyd is the patient. I would have loved to have seen more of the patients in that place instead of sending these 2 people running off to look for scratches in the snow. And I just find the clues, all of that uninteresting, and it goes on for a very long time. And then I won't even say what it is. Let people watch the movie to find it out for themselves if they've never seen it. But that final climactic shot involving Leo G. Carroll is the silliest thing that Alfred Hitchcock ever filmed. I don't mind him experimenting. I'm grateful for his experimentation. But that was the silliest image I've ever seen. Even if it results in a flash of color at the end, it's ridiculous. It doesn't look right.
No, physically it's bizarre. Yeah,
it's just awful. Yeah. It's awful. So I don't. It's just we all maybe I'm not a Theremin fan. I don't know what it is. But
I mean, the music's great though. I mean, it was hugely popular. But I know what you mean.
Don't forget this man. He has plenty to do with the terrifying mystery that causes this glamorous woman to risk her life and reputation in a reckless experiment. A woman who, because of her consuming love for this man, gambles everything to unlock the fearful secret in his heart. What insidious meaning did he read into the markings on a tablecloth? Why, even when he held his sweetheart in his arms, did he gaze in fear at the dark lines of her robe? We told you not to forget this man. He is Alfred Hitchcock, the famous director, whom you are not likely to forget after you see Spellbound.
Worth saying, the book focuses a lot more on the patients. They don't necessarily have analogues for the ones that are in the film in the way that those other characters do. But nonetheless, there's a lot more about the patients, which in fact is much more important in terms of the plot. as you'd expect, it's a more traditional Golden Age type story where you're in a kind of closed environment, lots of suspects, lots of characters, and you spend more time with them. This one goes rushing around, and you get these kind of ridiculous versions of a psychoanalysis where everything's a symbol that's instantly understandable. Gregory Peck must be an idiot for not realizing what it all means. It's visually very attractive. I think it's beautifully shot. I think the Dali designs are very striking. And in that respect, he deserved the credit he got for it. But they didn't really make as much of it as they were going to. There was a whole sequence with hanging pianos where Peck would have been dancing with the Bergman character, and then he would have kissed her and she turned to stone, and that's the main thing that all got yanked out. Whereas Rhonda Fleming would have been in the dream sequence. And yeah, it's her first film, isn't it? I think.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, and but yes,
she's so striking.
And although she's an actress, you think, well, she's made for Technicolor, because of the red hair and everything. But she looks great either way.
Didn't we see her in a cameo at the end of one of the films we watched from 1944? You and I partook in that little experiment in 1944 Film Noir, and I think she's in the end of one of those in a cameo at the very end.
Oh God,
I can't remember which one it is.
So maybe it's a first speaking role or something, but yeah.
It might be the one with Robert Mitchum and Kim Hunter. I think that's the one.
Oh, When Strangers Meet.
When Strangers Meet. She might be at the very end of
she's the one in the train?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay, we'll
have
to look that up.
The new bride that comes in and sits down with them
at
the very end. Yes, that's Rhonda Fleming.
Okay.
But here's a real part for her, and it's sadly truncated. She was amazing in it.
She gets the most value out of it. It's this fun as this kind of seemingly sort of very sexually repressed man-hating patient who does terrible things to every man she meets. But
I just want to say, too, because I've sounded so negative here, the only other Frances Beating novel I've read is called Murdered One by One, which is an amazing. It's a good, solid mystery involving a series of killings and a tontine, a lovely Golden Age trope. He does character so well. The victims are all portrayed beautifully in Death Walks and Eavesdrops. All the people in the town, all the various policemen up and down the county and the yard, they are all beautifully delineated. I'm sorry that there hasn't been a renaissance of beating. I'm glad to hear they're in the public domain. I wouldn't know which one to begin first. There is one that everyone says is fantastic. It's not quite a whodunit. It's more of a maybe inverted mystery.
Oh, okay. Sorry, not springing to mind.
I don't know, but if Brian Flynn can be
revived, then yes.
Revived. Why can't Frances Beating with all those wonderful books? I think he was a good writer. They were a good writer.
You need someone to actually get copies and scan them because Spellbound and Eavesdrops are the only ones that have been consistently reprinted. And so, in fact, when you go to the online site, which will have the Spellbound, although, I've got a paperback copy on my shelves, they actually specify whose copy they've scanned to make the online version. So it's literally this person's copy.
Let me ask you a question before we move on, because you had sent me a question regarding Spellbound about its presence in the canon as a whodunit. Do you think it works as a whodunit?
I think it's meant to. Whether it's successful as a whodunit, let's put it this way. I think that it sort of works as a whodunit. I don't think it's... you could argue that you've only got so many ways to go if you know it's going to be a whodunit. If you feel that that's where the film is going, then there are only so many places it can possibly go. So therefore, it's not in that sense a huge surprise. It does, in fact, work much better in the book. It could be better, and I can tell you where to get the better version. From that point of view, other respects, you may find other bits of it, because it's one of those books that is probably a bit too long. So I think the point is, it is definitely whodunit. The issue is more that Hitchcock tended to disdain the form. He tended to say he didn't do whodunits because he didn't think they were a good idea. There's no suspense. But in actual fact, we were talking about the fact that he has done several 100% genuine whodunits. The first one would be Murder from 1930, and he also directed the German language version of that, which is called Mary. Spellbound, you've got Stage Fright, which is a Selwyn Jepson adaptation, which is definitely a whodunit. And then I think you've got to include Vertigo. really, as a whodunit. It's structured as such. Obviously, famously and wonderfully, it sabotages that. But it's still, you get the big resolution of who the real villain really is at the end, and so you have to get to that. So it's structured like a whodunit. And then, of course, Psycho, which is a traditional whodunit with slight gothic trappings, and is a fantastic book and a fantastic movie, but is absolutely whodunit. So he did several whodunits even quite late into his career. So it's a form that works even for Hitchcock. So what's interesting about Spellbound is that while it conforms to the pattern, you could argue that, yeah, he's not trying very hard to make it work as a whodunit. That's not where the interest lies. And yet he's being comparatively faithful enough for it to still be presented as such. That's part of the hook for the audience, isn't it, really? It's not like you get shown who the villain is at the beginning or anything. You do have to wait till the end, to the final scene where it says, yes, it's me, that sort of thing.
He also rejected anything involving a closed circle. I don't think he found it interesting to look at a half a dozen people for 2 hours as you try and figure out which one of them is the killer. That's not, for him, an exciting story. It might be something he would read, but not something he wanted to produce. The whodunits you've mentioned all involve a flip, a twist, in terms of identity at the end. Even a movie that I find is as, in many ways, mediocre as Stage Fright has a great twist. He can do that. To Catch a Thief does the same thing.
Oh, that's the one I meant to include, actually. Yeah, sorry.
Right,
Forgot.
and you meet your killer early on. You just don't know they're the killer till the very end, probably. That's, I guess, a whodunit. It's not the kind of whodunit we tend to read as much in our literature. We tend to read more of that closed circle, group of suspects type of mystery, and I don't think that was of any interest to him.
No,
and I understand.
Although we'll talk about it in a minute, but of course you could argue that that's what Rope is, of course, in the sense that he loved stage dramas, and therefore the idea of having a locked group of people and you spend all your time with them was not exactly alien to the man. But yeah, okay, take your point.
Right. Let's ask that question that you've been asked before on this podcast. What if Hitchcock had directed René Clair's And Then There Were None? I would have liked to see that. I don't find the René Clair film particularly interesting. It's too full of humor and silliness, and I would have loved to have seen what Hitchcock might have made of that situation.
You know what? I think it would have been very close to what Clair came up with, because I think that's the way. I mean, Clair is such a great filmmaker. You're not keen. I don't know why, except of course you're mad about Agatha. I love the book. I'm a bit less crazy about the gal because I just don't know her as well as you do. But I think that the film is really good. Now, I take your point. It's about, do you want to make the dark version of that book, which is much heavier and more visually stark, and it weighs on you more? But you think, well, the way Hitchcock tended to, his ghoulish sense of humor would have probably resulted in a film that's kind of quite similar.
Well, you might have, yeah.
I'm thinking of also things like the reveal of the villain in And Then There Were None is exactly the kind of shot that Hitchcock would have done, right? So that's my opinion.
Also, it's 1945, and there's no way they're going to do. Even Agatha Christie rejected her own ending and her own dark atmosphere when she wrote the play, and René Clair is dramatizing the play on film and doing a fine job of that. And Hitchcock would have probably been stuck doing that too. He might have said, let's go back to the book. Let's go back to the darkness. But he would have never been allowed to do that. That killer had to be punished. And in the book, of course, they punished themselves. And it would have been interesting to see if Hitchcock could have figured out how to do that.
If he'd done it later on. But I think it's, as you rightly point out, I think what he tended to bridle against was this idea of the conventional structure, which is perhaps a little airless and doesn't allow him to do the things that he wants to do. Rope is, after all, an unusual example. Now, we're going to get to Rope in a minute, but we want to spend just a little bit of time on almost my favorite Hitchcock film, which is Notorious, and which is one of your absolute favorite Hitchcock films.
Absolute favorite. One of them, yes.
as you were pointing out, and there is a great book by Leslie Brill called The Hitchcock Romance, and it is a dark romance first and foremost. It's a kind of, not exactly a will they, won't they, but it's this idea of, will these two characters played by Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman be able, despite vicissitudes of life and career and, honor and duty to one's country, I guess, will they be able to get together? Will they be able to profess their love for each other? Will they be able to survive? There was apparently a version of the script in which one of them didn't make it at the end. So there's that whole aspect to it, which I think is, superbly realized, isn't it? I think, you watch it for the scenes with Cary Grant and Bergman, who are, of course, were deliberately kept apart structurally, but also when most of the time they're spent together, they are at cross purposes. They are not getting together. They're kind of having disagreements that in a way they shouldn't be having. And then you've got the third character played by Claude Rains, who is terrific in the film. He's a wonderful actor and who gets to have one of the first great important mother figures in Hitchcock movies, of course. And she's sensational. She's way more ruthless than he is.
Notorious.
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 She was a notorious woman of many desires.
He was an adventurous man of purpose.
Their secret love swept them on to the brink of disaster.
This is a very strange love affair.
Why?
Maybe the fact that you don't love me.
So the story is that Ingrid Bergman is the daughter of a Nazi sympathizer who goes to jail. Cary Grant is CIA operative in essence, or I guess it would have still been OSS then. Not sure. But anyway, 1946. And they want to track down neo-Nazis in Rio. And so she has this reputation as a bit of as a woman of loose morals. So they sort of say, so you don't care who you sleep and play around with, so come on. She, being the daughter of this neo-Nazi, although she doesn't actually share his ideas at all, is sort of dropped in to this group led by Claude Rains, or if not exactly led, he's one of the senior figures in it. And in essence, she's supposed to become his girlfriend and then inform on their activities, because they know they're up to something, they don't know what it is. It's got a great Hitchcock MacGuffin. It's just, what is this thing that they're all after? And we find out, and it doesn't matter. It could have been anything, but it's actually quite a good one. But in the middle of all of this, it's this relationship, this stark relationship, because Grant initially sort of treats her as a tramp because that's what he's been told she is. And, she's utterly loaded at the party he initially meets her at. But then he falls in love with her and then has to put her on this mission, which is a horrible thing to do to someone because she's put in a horrible position of having to sort of sell herself for the mission. So he kind of hates himself for doing it and hates her for doing it. First time I saw it, I knew it was just a totally brilliant movie. I just love it. And it's been ripped off lots of times. Most recently, I think in Mission Impossible 2, which is a really not good film, but they completely ripped off the plot from Notorious. It even has the racetrack scene in it. So when did you first see Notorious, actually? Do you remember?
I came to this movie very late. This was not one of the first films I watched. I don't think I watched it for years and years and years, long after I became a huge Hitchcock fan. And it has become one of my top 5. The idea that we talked about earlier of a good man torn between having a nice wife and a femme fatale, a dangerous woman. Here, the good man is a Nazi, and the femme fatale is the good girl because she is being forced to do terrible things.
How is the good man a Nazi? Hang on, what?
Because Hitchcock makes us sympathize with Sebastian, with Alexander Sebastian, makes us like him. Yeah. No, he's a terrible man, but who loves her purely? Who accepts her for all that she's been? And he knows she's been a party girl. He knows all those things, but he remembers how he used to feel about her. He still feels the same. He doesn't want her to be his girlfriend. He wants her to be his wife, and she becomes his wife. This is much deeper than just being a girlfriend. That means they must share the wedding bed. That's saying, you will marry this man. You will share his bed. You will become so intimate with him that you will open up his house to us. And so that's a much bigger thing. And then we switch now to Alicia being the center of this all. She's got this sweet, loving man who's a Nazi. And then she's got this guy who is sending her off to seduce someone after having done the exact same thing to her. He has recruited her through seduction. And she has fallen madly for him. So she will do anything for him. And again, we go back to this thing I said earlier, where what Hitchcock wants is for a man and a woman to grow out of their childishness, to grow out of their infantilism and find love and marriage with each other. And here it's Devlin and Alicia, and they have to take maybe the darkest path of any couple in a Hitchcock movie, because they have to basically turn each other into these horrible creatures. Louis Calhern?
Yes.
Is that Louis Calhern plays the head? And those scenes where they're all kind of laughing at her and joking about her like men do about a tramp. And he's just sitting there kind of taking it.
Well, but then he fights back.
And then he fights back.
It's a great scene.
I don't like this. I don't like her coming here.
She's had me worried for some time. A woman of that sort.
What sort is that, Mr. Beardsley?
Oh, I don't think any of us have any illusions about her character, have we, Devlin?
Not at all, not the slightest. Miss Huberman is first, last, and always not a lady. She may be risking her life, but when it comes to being a lady, she doesn't hold a candle to your wife, sir. Sitting in Washington playing bridge with 3 other ladies of great honor and virtue.
Take it easy, Deb.
Sorry.
I think those remarks about my wife are uncalled for.
Withdrawn? Apologize, sir.
We see him change, and we see her. It's really more about Devlin here, which is interesting because we spend more time, I think, on screen perhaps with Alicia, but not much. Yeah. But it's really Devlin's story, because it's about how Devlin finds his humanity again. One of those themes that I've always been interested in Hitchcock is that dark side of espionage. The idea that why is it that the enemy spy is a bad guy, but the American working undercover is a hero? They're both bad guys. They are both betraying the host country who has taken them in and trusts them. And so there's a darkness about espionage, and we see this again and again in Hitchcock. And here we see that the gang of good guys are pretty horrible. They're, they're like frat boys. And Devlin has to shed a lot of that has basically permeated his character so that he can earn Alicia's love. All she's really got to shed is her depression after having lost her father. That's a huge relationship that was lost because of his beliefs. And Claude Rains is maybe my favorite Hollywood actor of the day, and he's so good in this. And Madame Constantine, who looks like an evil nun. And then there's that incredible scene, which I think in a way foreshadows Psycho, where she wakes up and finds him sitting in her room going, Mother, I'm so upset. Alicia is a spy. She's a bad girl. And she's like, get my cigarettes. And she's sitting there smoking a cigarette in bed.
And it's hanging out the side of her mouth, right? So you know she's bad. Yeah.
Yes, she's bad. And she's like, look, this is what we're going to do, baby. And it's like, suddenly she's the femme fatale to her own son. And that is just that creepy, wonderful thing that makes this noir or noirish. It's a brilliant movie. It's so beautifully filmed. That amazing kiss in Notorious that we will see in a different form in Vertigo. Hitchcock really knew how to film that kind of romantic moment, even though both scenes have so much underneath, so many conflicting values and emotions and feelings and plot points underneath them. They're 2 of the greatest moments in Hitchcock. And behind it, much less, but I love it so much, is the kiss that greets Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window when Grace Kelly makes her first entrance, which is pretty much Grace Kelly kissing all of us. And it's quite a kiss. So for a man who was pretty technical and kind of a strange guy when it came to women, he did know how to swoop you off your feet in a moment of romance. And he does that here. So really, it's true. It's a dark love story, but it's got some noirish stuff, particularly when Alicia enters the enemy camp.
Obviously, if we're going to talk about dark love stories, then we could transition over to Rope and talk about what is arguably the most noirish and yet the least noir looking of the films of this set that we're discussing today.
I'll see you tonight at Brandon's party.
Okay. You can say yes, sir, just as well as in a taxi. Goodbye, darling.
Bye.
That's the last time she ever saw him alive. And that's the last time you'll ever see him alive. What happened to David Kentley changed my life completely, and the lives of 7 others. Janet Walker, Henry Kentley, the boy's father, his aunt, Mrs. Atwater, his best friend, Kenneth Lawrence, a housekeeper named Mrs. Wilson, and the 2 who were responsible for everything, Brandon Shaw and Philip Morgan.
Rope was released in 1948. It was Hitchcock's first independent film after finally leaving the contract he had with the Selznick organization. He'd become pretty unhappy about the contract. They apparently remained reasonably civil, actually, and even took holidays together as families years later. And so he set up his own company, and this was the first film that got made. And it's this adaptation of this play by Patrick Hamilton, Rope, which in America was produced as Rope's End, and which is from the 1920s and is based on the Leopold and Loeb case, which is that of 2 students in Chicago who killed another student purely for a thrill. This tells a similar story. The play was set in London and was about vaguely aristocratic people. This is a transposition of that, so it all takes place in New York, which is, I suppose, the American equivalent of London. But the whole thing has been, all the dialogue's been reshaped to make it American, although a couple of the actors are British, and the thrust of it has been slightly amended. But nonetheless, it's a film that is quite extraordinary. I mean, people always talk about it because it's this famous technical feat. It's shot in Technicolor, it's first in colour, but the whole film is done in extended long takes, and basically in a single apartment, so that the set has got walls that are on wheels and furniture can be wheeled in and out, so that this enormous 3-strip Technicolor camera can go through the set and follow things and do amazing moves and things. One of the shots lasts over 10 minutes, for instance. In other words, an entire reel in the camera. Others are a little bit briefer. There's always this idea that it's presented as a film that if you watch it, it feels like it's one continuous, unbroken take. This is not true. There are, in fact, of necessity, for technical reasons, hard cuts in the film, which would have been at real change points in the cinema, the original presentation, because otherwise the projectionist would have been able to focus. So you had to have it continuing. So there are sort of 5 moments in the film where, in essence, you cut from one character's point of view to another. But it is a film that when you get past the technical aspects of it, because it means it's in real time, in a single space, with all these amazing aspects of technical virtuosity, at heart, this is an incredibly bleak and dark and horrible story, and I think it's done very, very well. I mean, I don't know about you, I first saw Rope when I was 15 years old, and I was not that impressed when I saw it. I was disappointed. It was one of 5 Hitchcock films that had been out of circulation for decades, hadn't been sold for television, was not available on home video of any kind, and had finally been re-released. I found it disappointing compared with probably all the others. Rear Window and Vertigo are amongst that package, and those bowled me over. This one didn't. What I've found is that as I've got older and I've rewatched it, and also the Blu-ray looks amazing, so that helps. It looks very good. The Technicolor looks great. I find that it grows on me every time I see it. I find more interesting things about it. Because at the time it was considered if not exactly a failure, it didn't really set the world alight. The technique wasn't thought of as being that successful, and the story about these 2 lads who kill another young lad just for the thrill of it, and then stick it in this what is it? It's a, what do we call it?
It's a chest.
It's a chest in the middle of the room where they're going to have a party. So they're going to put all the plates and stuff on top of the chest. So they're going to eat off where his body is resting.
Funeral feast, funerary feast.
And I think audiences kind of found that maybe a bit queasy. And it was supposed to star Cary Grant, who would have been a great choice. He would have been perfect as the kind of old tutor of the two boys who instilled with them these ideals of Nietzsche and the Übermensch, but they take it to these horrible extremes, and he is sort of horrified as he slowly starts to realize what's happened. Instead, we get James Stewart because Cary Grant thought, no, this is too unsympathetic, I don't want to do it. Although he was starting to portray more psychologically complex characters post-war, he's still kind of avuncular and folksy. He's got a bit of a twinkle here, maybe, but as a character. But in terms of his characterization, he's not yet reached that level of neurosis, shall we say, that we get in the Anthony Mann westerns of the 1950s, and that then allows him to go and make a film like Vertigo, which is extremely different. But that's 10 years away. How do you think it holds up?
You've kind of said it all.
Oh, damn! I talk too much.
Well, like you, I did not appreciate this movie when I saw it. I don't even remember when it was, but I was younger, and I think it is a film that sort of fell victim to its experimental nature, the focus on the long takes, and the making of a really nifty crime thriller play into a color movie. This did not benefit from color. I think it's maybe more than any other Hitchcock film, a film that has benefited from time passing. It has been rethought, rewatched, reconsidered. Our culture has shifted and changed. And so we can look at what was probably going on underneath and was not allowed to even be spoken on the set. Arthur Lawrence wrote so many things that I love and was evidently a very difficult and unpleasant man. And he talks a great deal about making this film, which I guess was actually from a treatment by Hume Cronin, right? I mean,
yes.
Hume Cronin started it off. He approached the play and probably made it more, quote unquote, palatable for 1949 audiences. And then Arthur Lawrence tried every way he could with subtext to get back to the original play and to whatever's going on in Arthur Lawrence's brain. But that's what makes this so fascinating when we look at it from a modern perspective. Yes, I'm aware of Cary Grant as the potential original Rupert. I heard James Mason spoken about on another program recently. I don't know. But and also I'd heard about Montgomery Clift being considered for the role of that Farley Granger played. And my understanding from Lawrence, whose word I seldom trust, was that both Grant and Clift, who were at least bisexual, thought it was a terrible idea to play essentially gay characters, even though it was all heaped in subtext. And then you have Jimmy Stewart, the all-American guy. And maybe in 1949, the idea was that Stewart would be the entry for the average viewer into this depraved story. But he's totally wrong for the part. And the stories that I hear whenever I'm reading about or hearing about this is that he didn't have a clue about what was going on in this story. He didn't know, he didn't understand the relationship between the professor and his two students. And you can see that in his performance. He's clueless, sitting there with his little plate of food and his eyes going back and forth like they do to much better effect in Rear Window. I love Jimmy Stewart in all the other films he did for Hitchcock. But I find him so horribly miscast here, and it's too bad because everyone else is fantastic. I think Farley Granger is fantastic because he can play the weakness. He can play the passive partner to John Dahl, who is so good and deserves so much bigger a career. He's so great in Gun Crazy. He has that kind of flippancy and that kind of preening madness. You know, the scene at the opening when the two of them are strangling him and then they smoke a cigarette. This is so evocative of things that nobody discussed on the set. I'm just thrilled by Hitchcock's boldness in choices like this. The party guests, Constance Collier, Hardwick, they're all fabulous. When I watch another Hitchcock play turned to movie, a play turned to a Hitchcock movie, Dial M for Murder, I'm always a little held back by the staginess of it. But here, I think in that sense, the camera techniques work really beautifully. They open it up, they make it more interesting, and the play flies by. And the scenes with people sitting and eating and having a dinner party while everybody's looking at that trunk, it's exciting, it's suspenseful and very dark. I just wish that Stewart could have come up to that. There's that one of the cuts you mentioned is that the Philip is talking about killing a chicken.
Yes.
Is it Philip's calling about killing a chicken? And then we have the cut to Rupert, like, another bird reference from Alfred Hitchcock. And it, for some reason, clues Rupert into what's going on. He starts to become even more suspicious of them.
Well, it's because he's denying that it ever happened and Rupert was there.
Right.
So he knows it happened. Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is a film that grows for me every time I watch it. And partly because I'm just very excited by what he was doing in this terribly repressed time of history. And now we're able to kind of sit back and relax and enjoy it for what it was. Even though he did have to cut back on it, I think the relationship between the two murderers in the play is much more overt. But here, it's still clear. That wonderful actress who plays their housekeeper, one of those people who's just too sweet and can't see the truth, and yet in another way defends them, loves them because of their relationship, because she sees this as a house of love, in a way, an apartment of love. I mean, it's a really fascinating and bold film for him. Is it noir? I don't know.
I think it counts as noir. And certainly by the time you get to the ending, where the lighting effects are quite striking, because one of the interesting things about the film is that it's in real time. So it's 80 minutes. It's more or less from the murder to the end of the film, but with a party in the middle. But it all takes place in real time. So one of the bravura aspects of it is that it's all in front of this wonderful window overlooking New York, and they've got this amazing sort of cyclorama behind there, where it gets darker and darker, and you go from sort of sunset to actual night, and as the story gets darker and darker, and it's done beautifully.
And along with Dial M for Murder and Lifeboat, it has one of my 3 favorite Hitchcock cameos. I love
the one where
cameo.
he's just what is it? It's a little neon sign, right?
Neon sign of his silhouette. Yeah.
Although he is, he's also apparently that is him in the opening shot of the film.
Is it?
Yeah, walking in the street under the title. I thought it was him, but I'm not. It's so far away you can't tell. But yes, it's a great one. It's right up there with the one in the newspaper in Lifeboat. I agree. The advantage it has over something like Dial M for Murder, at least it makes more sense in terms of its sticking so much to its theatrical roots, and by essentially staging it in one set because it's in real time, whereas the other one isn't. I think Dial M for Murder is great, but I take your point completely. Here it has more logic, and therefore the filming style suits it and makes sense from that point of view. Because, of course, you see things happening in real time. If you're cutting, you're never sure if it's real time. Not really.
And what makes it noirish, I guess, is that we really are much more than Dial M for Murder, which also has a murderer as the central figure. We are in this weird, shadowy place between repulsion and sympathy for our 2 main characters. We have no one else to really identify with, because Rupert comes in late, sits down and is quiet for most of the time and just sort of takes everything in. And so he's the one I guess we're supposed to identify with, like, oh my God, we're waiting as outsiders for him to realize what happened. But for most of this movie, we're following these 2 young men putting together a party. We're not hoping they succeed, because very interestingly, we were shown the murder, and it's pretty gruesome at the very top. and we know how awful they are. And then as we start to listen to them and realize their motive, which is equally horrifying, because we're better, because we can, because we did, Hitchcock is asking the audience to go back and forth with these two guys, not embrace them, but not necessarily reject them. And he's putting us in their company more intimately than anybody else on that screen. And we have to deal with those feelings, which I think puts us almost at the center of a kind of noirish situation. We're in a sort of nightmare world. It should be a lovely luncheon. And instead, there's a corpse under the chicken a la king or whatever is being served.
In terms of the technique, you're thinking, how great would it have been if you'd had a whole 80-minute movie about Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman, about they're setting up to have their nice dinner, but he's torn apart by the fact that he has to send her off on this mission, and to have that done in real time with all the camera stuff and all that thing. And okay, you would have had people come in and going out maybe, but wouldn't have that been amazing? It can work. And as you say, the advantage that you get is that you're spending so much time with them and you can see the characterization evolve and develop because it's happening right in front of you. And it isn't just being massaged by editing and so on. Although, of course, there is editing here, but of a different kind. And it privileges performance to a great extent. It allows them all to be great. I don't mind Stuart nearly as much as you do, but it could have been so much better, yes. I get why he's there, because in the end, they've deliberately almost invited him because he's the one threat that they have. He knows them so well that he might be able to understand what's happened, which, of course, is what eventually transpires. And it's hubris on the part of the John Dahl character to have invited him, because they didn't have to do it. They didn't have to have a party. They didn't have to do any of these things. They could have had the thrill, but no, he wanted to have the excitement of besting all the guests, do this ghoulish, horrible thing and them not knowing about it, plus pulling one over on their old schoolmaster, who is the one who knows them so well.
At the same time, though, what I feel is missing is a certain sense of affection and moral complicity regarding, or philosophical complicity between the professor and his students at the start of this. I feel like at the end, if he were to keep Rupert back and reveal what they'd done, John Dahl would have expected a certain amount of amazement, maybe even some sense of good for you. Wow, you have actually taken what I've only theorized about and put it in practice. I'm so impressed. The student has learned from the master. In his weird mind, I think that's what this man is thinking will happen. And it could never happen with Jimmy Stewart. I would have liked to see a professor who it might have happened to, who when we meet him, we're not sure where he lies. We see him on a similar level in terms of the Nietzschean philosophy, the idea of superior versus inferior men. That would have been a very interesting thing. It might not have worked for 1949 audiences, but I just think that would have been fascinating. And I don't want them to remake it with other people, but I just think it's a great what if moment of a movie that it turns out the distractions of the technology took us away from the fact that the technology actually helps the movie. And then the hidden nature, the subversive nature of the subject matter, which has become more openly discussed, but was there at the same time, must have made those audiences feel so uncomfortable and would have been exciting. I think all of us who love Hitchcock, we share a wish to have been at the theater on opening night to see what it would have felt like, to watch Rope, to watch Psycho, to watch these movies as the audience experiences them for the first time. Because evidently, audiences in those days went nuts when Hitchcock manipulated them. And I would have loved to have seen how that happened. So
the one nice thing about seeing them on that re-release that was done, I think, in 1984, was that at least when I got to see these 5 films, I don't think many of the people in the audience had been able to see them for a long time. So it felt new-ish. Right. But obviously, you're not seeing this in 1948, you're not seeing Vertigo in 1958, you're not seeing Rear Window in 1953. So absolutely, it's not the same thing. In fact, speaking of later versions, have you ever seen the John Logan version of the Leopold and Loeb story, And Never the Sinner? which is
No.
It's really good. I saw that on the stage with Julian Glover as the kind of equivalent role of the James Stewart one. And it's much closer to the reality of what actually happened in the 1920s. It's the best version I've seen of it so far, because there are several now. Of course, Compulsion, which was filmed with Orson Welles and Bradford Dillman and Dean Stockwell, is the other better-known telling of the story. Although, again, that's fictionalized. They don't use the names.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, I think all the people in it were dead, but of course, because they got released, didn't they? I think people made it out of prison eventually. They served their sentences and got out, I think, you know.
I'm proud to say that I do not follow true crime villains enough to know what happened to them. I hear the Menendez brothers might go home. But that's happening in California, and they talk about it.
It's the wrong part of California, man. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
On which note, thank you so much for coming to discuss 1940s noir Hitchcock with me. This has been really fantastic.
So I look forward to coming back and talking about the 50s with you.
That's brilliant. Okay, well, something to look forward to. So thanks so much, Brad, and let's hope we had a very nice 2024. 2024? Oh, let's hope we had a very nice 19... Oh, God, what year is it? Yeah, we're in 2024, but people are going to be listening to this...
Not 1924. What's the matter with you?
Oh, my God. Yeah, no. People are going to be listening to this in 2024.
They'll listen to it in 2025.
I'm just going to cut
Happy
all
New
of
Year,
this.
everyone.
Yeah,
right.
I was going to say, I hope everybody had a really good New Year. Yeah. You take care, Brad. I'm going to talk to you soon, all right? Take care.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners, and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix. And it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.